Hey, everybody, welcome, 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 welcome. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. Uh, Let me get TikTok started up and then we'll get going here, okay? For the book read. Welcome, everybody. Happy Sunday. Okay. It's good to see everybody today. Forgot to do the intro. That's how today's going to go. Just waiting for TikTok to come up so we can get going here. Hey, everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Sunday. My name is Charlotte. I'm going to be your host for the next hour or so. Actually, hour. I'm also the owner of the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team based out of Northern California. We're 45 strong up and down the state. So if you have hey, Chris Cahill. So if you have a paranormal problem or you think you have a paranormal problem, contact me. I'm on all the social media pages, and we'll get out there to help you out. We also have branches in the state of Nevada, Washington State, back east, Hawaii. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. What are we doing today? Well, no tarot readings, that's for sure. What we're doing today is, I see my moderator Kathy's in the house, and so is Chris. So, TikTok, if I do get gifts from you guys and I can't acknowledge them because I can't really see, I'll be reading and not, looking up at the screen. Kathy will thank you for me. Should anybody desire to give me gifts, I do have a goal of collecting 10 Santa Cocos today. If we can do that, that would be great. Anyhow, introductions are done. So we've been reading this book for the past 5 weekends, and it's not your usual cheery Christmas stories. There's a lot of dark stories in here, but it's interesting to see, because it not only encompasses Christmas, it encompasses the winter itself, winter holidays and stuff. So. There's dark stories in here, but there's also, and we should be coming up on them. There's also some really cool ghost stories in here as well. So we're going to continue with it, and I'll read for about an hour. And then following that, at 3 p.m. Pacific, we're going to finish off that gingerbread house that we started. It should only be about maybe 30 minutes worth of work on that. Then we're going to start the National Lampoon's Vacation Christmas house plus Cousin Eddie's trailer. So we're going to be doing that as well. So it's going to be a busy day. Let me get my chat room up over here. I forgot all about my chat room. Hang on, guys. There we go. I got my chat room up. Let me get my other info up here. My contact info. Okay. Too many buttons to push, I just wish TikTok would let, what I'm doing here. I wish TikTok would just let me do it on from one source. But it's not letting me do that. So, unfortunately, I have to have TikTok on the phone and then my laptop doing other stuff. All right. Well, let's get started on this. I'm going to read for about an hour. Like I said, some of these stories are really, really cool Christmas stories, really cool ghost stories for Christmas. And some aren't so cool, as you guys have found out, as far as death and everything. And there's a lot of stuff that happens during the winter season that we don't realize. So the book is, hang on. The book is The Spirits of Christmas, The Darkness of the Holidays. Okay. So again, for both networks, let's just put this out there. Do not turn me into the internet police. I'll try and clean these things up as I'm reading them, but just to let you know, okay? All right, just to let you know, and make you aware of that. So you don't turn me into the internet police, okay? All right, everybody, here we go, and we'll get into this. We'll read for about an hour. Chris Cahill, I see you out there. I see you guys. I can barely see you guys, but I see you guys. Popular, thank you so much for the go popular. So again, I'm trying to collect 10 Santa hot cocos. If you guys can help me with that, that would be great. If not, that's fine too. Just double tap that screen. See how many likes we can get for today, okay? See how many likes we can get for today. All right, everybody, at 2 of you, welcome. Book of Face, welcome. And, of course, TikTok, welcome. So here we go, gang. We left off at, let me get my mic in a spot where everybody can hear me. We left off at the fire at Our Lady of Angels School. Okay, it currently is 12:18. I'll be reading till 1:18. And then again, 3 p.m. Pacific, back on to build that gingerbread house with you guys live. All right, so Queen of Heaven Cemetery in the Chicago suburb of Hillside is a beautiful, restful spot. Green in the Illinois summer and dotted with color from the flowers left at the graves of loved ones. It's a place to reflect on lives lived and lost. A place where the living can go to find peace and comfort. A place where the dead can be remembered with dignity. One of the countless memorials here is a blocky stone monument covered with names. The Virgin Mary stands in high relief on one side of the block, her head bowed and her hands outstretched in welcome. This is not a fancy Renaissance style sculpture. Mary's dressed in a simple robe, and a small halo shines behind her veiled head. The message on the monument is simple too. Our Lady of the Angels, pray for us. This is the memorial to the 92 students and 3 nuns who perished in the fire of Our Lady of Angels Grade School on December 1st, 1958. This tragedy led to a complete overhaul of school safety regulations. It is still considered one of the most awful and horrifying events in Chicago's history. The Blessed Virgin Mary Order of Nuns was founded in 1833 by Sister Mary Frances Clark. In 1867, the order, devoted to education, began serving in the Chicago Archdiocese. The nuns of the order were very concerned about fire safety, and with good reason. In 1870, their mother house in Dubuque, Iowa, had burned to the ground. Since then, for 88 years, every member of the order included in their daily prayers a request that they and their students be spared from fire. Please know that I have full permission from the author and publisher to read this. I read it every year. Our Lady of the Angels Grade School at 3820 West Iowa Street, Iowa. See, Iowa and Iowa. That's kind of creepy. In Chicago's Humboldt Park neighborhood, was one of the schools served by these nuns. Many Catholic families attended the school, with siblings filling several grades. 1958 was right in the middle of the baby boom, too. With around 1,400 students enrolled at the school, classrooms were very overcrowded. Sister Davidus recalled that when the Monsignor came to her classroom to hand out report cards, she had to thread her way between an extra couple of rows of desks to meet him at the classroom door. On December 1st, 1958, it was a cold and cloudless day in Chicago. It was a Monday, and the students were back at their desks after the weekend. The children had eaten lunch, and afternoon classes had begun. The fire began about 2:20 p.m. in a 30-gallon trash can at the bottom of the stairwell. The cardboard trash can, with metal rings at the top and bottom to hold it, was full of paper. After burning through all the paper, the fire smoldered for a while in the confined space under the stairwell. 3 walls covered in sheet metal reflected and intensified the heat. The heat continued to build, and finally a window shattered. Oxygen was sucked into the area, causing the smoldering fire in the garbage can to flare up. The flames spread to the wooden staircase, varnished woodwork, and walls covered with 14 layers of paint. The top 2 layers were particularly flammable. Custodians had used a rubberized plastic paint. As it burned, it produced a heavy toxic black smoke. The stairwell turned into a giant chimney. The fire was stopped from entering the first floor corridor by the fire doors, but it swept up the stairway and devoured the 85-foot-long hallway that led to the second floor classrooms, burning it over at more than 1,400 degrees. One reason the fire was such a deadly inferno was because of the roof. Over the years, the roof had been sealed several times with hot tar, the new layer being poured over the old. If the old tar had been stripped off before applying a new roof, the fire could have burned through the roof and vented itself. As it was, the multiple layers of tar acted as a seal. I can't say the word today. Great for keeping rain off and fire in. Under that seal, the fire was trapped, insatiable, a dragon roaring out of control. Hot air and gases continued to flow up from the basement. They were inside the wall now, feeding through an open shaft that had once held a drinking fountain, now disconnected. The flames filled the small attic above the second floor ceiling, moving towards the 6 classrooms in the north wing packed with 329 students and 6 teachers. These secondary flames found their way through 2 ventilation grills in the ceiling and dropped down into the second floor hallway, joining the primary fire. The first sign of trouble in room 209 came when a student was going about his daily chore of collecting waste paper from his classmates. When he bent down to pick up the metal garbage basket near the back of the room, for some reason the basket fell hot. Just then another student told Sister Davidus, the teacher, that he smelled something burning. When teacher and student tried to open the door to the hallway, smoke poured out into the classroom. The inferno raged through the second floor hallway. The glass transom windows over the classroom doors shattered from the intense heat. Smoke and flames poured into the classrooms over the transoms, caught the flammable ceiling tiles on fire, and forced the students towards the windows. Here, younger students ran into their own difficulties trying to escape the flames. The window ledges were 37.5 inches off the floor, too high for little kids to scramble over. Some students, trusting their teacher when she told them to pray for help, sat quietly at their desks as they'd been told, folded their hands, and prayed, watching as the paint on the walls changed color from white to tan to brown. Firemen fought their way into one classroom to find 24 children sitting dead at their desks. Their books were still open in front of them. The fire alarm rang only inside the school. It didn't transmit a signal to the fire department. When the fire trucks did arrive, they went first to the wrong address because a housekeeper had phoned in the alarm from the rectory next door to the school. The scene that met the firefighters was among the worst ever encountered by first responders in the history of American fire service. The smoke conditions were horrifying, even for trained professionals. Thick black toxic smoke poured from the building, making entry difficult, and breathing apparatus equipment for the firefighters didn't exist in 1958. It might not have helped anyway. The firefighters battled their way through that smoke it was so smoke-filled anyway. According to one fire chief who fought the blaze, it wouldn't have made any difference. That smoke was so bad, all you would have had was a bunch of dead firemen. The firefighters tried their best, though. They rescued 160 students from the flames. The injured students and teachers were taken to St. Anne's and to other hospitals on the city's west side. St. Anne's, being the closest to the school, ended up with the most casualties, almost twice as many as the other hospitals combined. Luckily, the fire happened during the 3 o'clock shift change, meaning that twice the number of hospital staff was present when the injured started pouring in. At St. Anne's, 37 children and 3 nuns were admitted. Of those, 10 children and 1 nun were dead on arrival. 2 more students died before they could be admitted. The number of victims was horrifying. 90 students and 3 nuns were injured, not only from burns and smoke inhalation, but also from jumping to escape the fire. The deaths were even more appalling. The fire claimed the lives of 92 children and 3 nuns. The school was woefully unprepared for a fire. There were no smoke detectors and no sprinkler system. There were fire doors, but only on the first floor. And there was only one fire escape for the entire building. Unbelievably, the school had passed a safety inspection only 2 months before the fire. The response to the fire was immediate. At Cook County Jail, inmates lined up to donate blood. At Stateville Prison in Joliet, inmates gave up their cigarettes and candy rations, donating that money to the fire fund. The tragedy was reported all over the world. The BBC called the fire too awful for words. The response of the Catholic Church, meanwhile, was somewhat muted. Although the Archdiocese was just as devastated by the tragedy as neighborhood families were, they were ill-equipped to provide any relief. So that Catholic Charities sent priests and nuns out into the neighborhood, but their role was to console the survivors, not to provide counseling for them. Consolation was needed, as well as counseling. One of the most heart-wrenching tales to arise from this tragedy was the experience of Stanley Berta. On the day of the fire, Berta was occupying a bed in Cook County Hospital on Polk Street. This was a place where folks down on their luck could come for inexpensive health care. And Berta had had more than his share of bad luck recently. A week or so before, Berta had been laid off from his job at Bowman Dairy. This worried him, as he had a wife and 4 kids to support. Then on the day after Thanksgiving, he'd been chopping wood in the basement, and a piece of metal, either from the axe or a stray nail, flew up and struck his left eye. Berta was taken to Cook County, where he had an operation to remove the shard of metal from his eye. As he lay in the hospital after the surgery, Berta must have been asking himself, what else could possibly go wrong? That's when a priest came in and told Berta that his oldest child, 13-year-old Beverly Ann, had been killed in the fire at Our Lady of the Angels. She'd been taken to the Cook County morgue and was now lying on a cold metal table right across the street from the hospital, where her father had his eye operation. Berta clambered out of his hospital bed and went in search of his doctor. He had to go home. He had to be with his wife. His doctor released him, but he warned Bertie not to cry. If you cry, the salt from your eyes might scald your eye, the doctor said. If that happens, it could blind you. Bertie's response? God's will be done. Some of the parishioners of Our Lady of the Angels found it difficult to accept God's will in the weeks and months after the tragedy. For the children who escaped the fire, survivors' guilt was compounded by the religious teachings of the Catholic Church. The nuns explained to the children that only the good ones were taken. Using kid logic to puzzle this out, many survivors came to the conclusion that if the good ones had died, and if they themselves had survived, then they must be bad. One of the survivors, Mary Jane Nucio Cozy, was in 5th grade at the time of the fire. She escaped the fire unharmed. She shared her feelings years later. The ones who died were called the lucky ones, the chosen ones. They were the ones God wanted. Those of us who lived weren't chosen. They were the angels. We were the kids who were left behind. And the parents whose children had died were being handed a lot of nonsense too. They were being told their child was now an angel in heaven, but they were angry as hell about it. Yet, how could they be angry if that's what God wanted for them? Shame on you if you're crying or being angry when God chose your child, when you really are a blessed person, because you've got your own personal angel in heaven. It was so backward, so ludicrous. The fire at Our Lady of the Angel School gave rise to many amazing stories. Some parishioners had mysterious premonitions. One mother had an unsettling vision of her small son in a casket on the evening before the fire. Linda Malinsky, 10 years old, and in the 5th grade, woke up crying from a nightmare Sunday night. When her mother came running to see what was wrong, Linda cried, "Mommy, I can't breathe." Linda had asthma, and it had woven its way into her dream. She had a nightmare that her family's apartment was on fire and filling with smoke, and she woke up coughing. Her mother calmed her down, reassuring the young girl that everything was fine. As Linda calmed down, she sleepily mumbled, "Mommy, I hear people screaming." Linda and her brother both stayed home from school sick on Monday morning, but felt better after lunch. Mary Malinsky took her children's temperatures and decided they were both well enough to go to school for afternoon classes. Linda died in the fire. Her brother survived. There were several reports of crisis apparitions at the time at that fire. One woman said that her parents had come to the school to look for her and her brother. They found the girl, and the mother looked up to see the boy running towards his parents with a big smile on his face. And the milling girl, and the sorry about that. Okay. Big smile on his face. It jumped on me. In the milling confusion, the parents lost track of the boy. Hours later, they learned to their horror that he hadn't left the school at all. He had died in his 2nd grade floor classroom. To her dying day, the woman's mother was convinced she'd seen her son outside the school that day. Another story tells of a boy who searched frantically for his sister in the chaos outside the school. He spotted her a block away, walking in the direction of their house. He sagged with the relief of knowing her sister was safe. But when he got home, he found out that his sister had indeed perished. Many of the little ghosts come back with words of comfort for their grieving families. "Don't worry," one girl's spirit told her devastated brother. "I'm going to watch over you." Another ghost sat with his mother and held her hand after she had been to the morgue to identify his body. People still claim to smell smoke at the memorial in Queen of Heaven Cemetery, where 25 of the children who died were buried. And a student at the school built to replace Our Lady of Angels told of hearing screams in the hallway at the new school. She filled page after page of drawing paper with sketches of the faces she saw in her dreams. Faces of the fire victims. Hey, my chat disappeared. Hang on, what's up with that? Why did my chat disappear? There we go. Do not go away. All right. The Silver Bridge. The Silver Bridge collapsed. Sorry, the page flipped. Okay. The Silver Bridge, 1,750 feet long, was a stretch of U.S. Highway 35 that connected Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with Gallipolis, Ohio. The bridge spanned the Ohio River and was a major thoroughfare between the two states. Built in 1928, the bridge was famous as an excellent engineering achievement. Hundreds of cars carrying thousands of people drove over that bridge every day from 28 until 1967. On December 15th, 1967, the bridge collapsed during evening rush hour at 4:55 p.m., sending 60 to 70 cars plunging into the frigid waters of the Ohio River. Only 5 people managed to escape their submerged vehicles and swim to safety. On the Ohio side, about 250 feet of the bridge slammed into land, killing 4 people and injuring 8. Witnesses said the bridge listed sharply, throwing cars and trucks into the river, then collapsed with a slow motion groan on top of the vehicles, grinding them into the mud at the bottom of the river. 46 people died when the Silver Bridge collapsed. Ben Cedar crossed the Silver Bridge 3 times on the day it collapsed. He worried every time he had to cross that bridge. It would often sway alarmingly, and if you got stuck in a traffic jam, there was simply nowhere to go. Cedar crossed the bridge just before 5 p.m. on December 15th. He stopped in Ohio at a Kroger store and used a payphone to check in with his office. He was a Kirby salesman. As he hung up the phone, he heard other store customers talking about a bridge collapse. Bill Needham was a 27-year-old truck driver from North Carolina who was on the bridge when it fell. His rig sank quickly to the bottom of the river. He held his breath until he could roll down the cab window. He wriggled into the pitch-black water and swam for the surface. He grabbed some floating debris, and after about 15 minutes, he was pulled onto a rescue boat. He was taken to Pleasant Valley Hospital with a broken back. Needham's driving partner, Robert Tao, was not as lucky. He was in the sleeping berth at the back of the cab and had strapped himself in. Tao had just built a new home for his wife and 3 small children and had bought a farm. December 15, 1967 was supposed to have been his last day as a long-haul trucker. And the most incredible thing about this disaster? It was caused by the failure of one tiny part of the whole massive thing. At the time of the bridge's construction in 1928, people were driving Model Ts, which weighed about 1,500 pounds. Permitted truck weights in those days were around 20,000 pounds or 20 tons. But as time went on, cars and trucks both got bigger and heavier. By 1967, the average family car weighed about 4,000 pounds, and truck limits were set at 60 tons or more. Traffic itself was heavier, with more drivers on the roads, bumper-to-bumper traffic jams on the bridge, stopped traffic flow several times a day, 5 days a week. This put even more stress on the structure. Investigators later determined that the entire bridge collapsed because of the failure of one single link, a single eye-bar in a suspension chain that had a defect 1/10 of an inch deep. For readers interested in cryptids, there's an intriguing story, a postscript to this story. Some people believe the Silver Bridge collapse of December 15th, 1967 is linked to the Mothman sightings that began in the area in November 66. Citizens of West Virginia reported sightings of a winged humanoid in the year before the disaster. Some say the Mothman sightings foretell impending doom. Others blame Mothman for actually causing the tragedy. Some go as far as to label it a demonic entity bent on leaving destruction and sorrow in its wake. The good folks of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, aren't taking any chances. The Mothman Festival is held every year in downtown Point Pleasant to celebrate the mysterious cryptid, whatever it may be. Now, the next story is interesting. We actually read the actual book to the next story, and what I found interesting about the book, and we might read it again. We might read it again. What I found interesting about the book is that it's written by somebody who does not believe, well, at the time when he wrote it, he did not believe in the paranormal at all. And so, as he puts the book together, he starts to become a believer because he starts meeting up with psychics, and he realizes, it's not leaning, I don't want it to fall. And he realizes that that pilots and all these other people, real professional people, were seeing these ghosts on these planes. Okay, so we're going to read The Crash of Flight 401. Okay, and it's an interesting story, and maybe sometime this year we can revisit and reread that book, because that book's something. Because it's interesting to see how he not only interviews psychics and stuff, he interviews skeptics. So you get both sides of the coin with that book. That's what makes it so cool. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 was on its way to Miami International Airport on the night of December 29th, 1972. Oh, wow. Check that out. See when we're reading this? Okay, I'll shut up. The Lockheed TriStar was making its final approach when a panel light came on in the cockpit, signaling trouble with the landing gear. The pilot, Captain Robert Loft, and flight engineer Donald Repo weren't unduly concerned. The plane had only been in service for 4 months, and it was the pride of the fleet. Flight 401 was one of the most modern and technologically advanced passenger jets of its day. First Officer Albert Stockstill had been instructed to lower the landing gear. He did so, but not all the wheel indicator lights were green. Captain Loft figured it was probably a faulty bulb. Stockstill tried to remove the bulb, while Don Repo went down into the avionics bay to check visually to make sure the landing gear was down. In all this calm problem solving, none of the three men realized that the autopilot had shut off, and the plane was losing altitude over the alligator-infested Everglades. Flight 401 was going 227 miles per hour when it smashed into the swamp. Many passengers were killed on impact, as was First Officer Stockstill. Don Repo and Bob Loft survived the crash. When rescue teams reached the crash site several hours later, Repo was rushed to the hospital, but died of his injuries soon afterward. Loft died at the scene of crash before rescuers arrived. 98 passengers and crew were killed when Flight 401 was lost. An official investigation into the accident concluded that the crash was caused by pilot error. Captain Loft was an experienced pilot. He had flown the TriStar models since their introduction, and he had over 30,000 hours experience in them. He had a dependable crew, too, but every man of the cockpit crew failed to monitor the jumbo jet's altitude as they tried to fix the problem with the undercarriage. Later, it was discovered that the nose wheel was down and locked at the time of the crash. Captain Loft had been right. The problem was a faulty bulb after all. The massive Whisperliner was in pieces, but some of those pieces, like the galley, were still usable. Eastern Airlines decided to salvage those parts. Just blew up really big. I can do that. I can read this blind. This is cool. Eastern Airlines decided to salvage parts of the downed plane and install them on other aircraft, including Flight 318 and Flight 903. Flight engineers arrived. Okay, flight engineers arrived before the other crew members did. I want to try and get this down a little bit. I made it big there. There we go. Before the other crew members to do pre-flight checks on the planes. One day, an engineer came on board and was puzzled to see an Eastern employee already sitting in his seat. His puzzlement turned to shock when the man turned to face him, and the engineer recognized Don Repo. "You don't need to worry about the pre-flight. I've already done it," the dead man said. Then he vanished. Attendants on Flight 318 started seeing Captain Loft on their plane. One stewardess saw the captain standing in the aisle near the back of the plane. He turned around and looked at her with a smile, then faded away. The stewardess dropped in a faint. Another crewman said he heard the dead captain's voice come over the public address system, asking passengers to put on their seatbelts. Still another saw Loft's ghost sitting in a passenger seat, staring out the window. Crew members were not the only ones seeing ghostly apparitions. On 2 separate occasions, passengers flagged down passing stewardesses to let them know that the man sitting next to them, the one dressed in the uniform of an Eastern Airlines flight officer, looked horribly pale and sat there without moving or speaking. On both occasions, the stewardesses duly checked on the ill passenger and found nothing but an empty seat. And both startled passengers were shown photographs of Eastern Airlines staff and identified Don Repo as the sick-looking man in the empty seat next to them. Several caterers loading plane 318 for its next flight rushed off the plane and refused to go back to finish their job. They had all seen a flight engineer in the galley who vanished in front of their eyes. The officials at Eastern Airlines were not at all pleased with the numbers of ghost stories being circulated around their planes. They threatened to fire any Eastern employee caught telling tales. This was a teensy bit hypocritical, because the vice president of the company spoke with Captain Loft on a Miami-bound flight. As soon as he realized he was speaking with Loft, the ghost disappeared. But the stories continued to circulate. In 1974, an article about the haunted planes appeared in the newsletter of the U.S. Flight Safety Foundation, which was further source of embarrassment for the company's top brass. But then, the spirits of Bob Loft and Don Repo changed their tactics just slightly. They had just been appearing to crew and passengers, and sometimes scaring the pace out of them. But now, the Phantoms had a message for the living crew of the planes they haunted. Stewardess Faye Merriweather was working in the galley of Flight 903 on a jaunt from New York City to Mexico City when she saw a weird reflection in the oven window. The galley had been refitted onto Flight 903, and this was the same oven that had been on Flight 401. The reflection wavered, then resolved itself into a face, the face of Don Repo. The face seemed to be trying to speak, more fascinated than frightened. Merriweather quietly got two of her co-workers, another stewardess and engineer, to come down the galley with her. When the three got back, Don Repo's face was clear. The apparition's lips twitched, and the ghostly face spoke. "Watch out for fire on this airplane," an eerie voice said in a hollow monotone. The flight arrived in Mexico City without incident, but the three crew members couldn't forget the ghostly warning. And on the return trip, they had reason to remember that warning. The plane was sitting on the runway in Mexico City, preparing for takeoff, when the starboard engine failed. The engine backfired several times, and the engineers quickly shut it down before it caught fire. It was Don Repo's spirit that appeared most often, always dressed in his Eastern Airlines uniform. He was usually seen sitting in a plane's first-class section or in the crew area, and sometimes in the cockpit. The Phantom always appeared calm and relaxed, but very concerned about the plane's safety. Often, the ghost manifested to make suggestions or give warnings to the plane's crew, who only realized they were dealing with the paranormal when Repo vanished after talking with them. Loft and Repo seemed to be haunting the planes to which they were still connected because of the crash that killed them. Perhaps they felt responsible for the deaths of the 96 people who perished with them in that humid, mucky swamp. Their message was always one of protection and of responsibility. They appeared on many occasions to warn crews about equipment malfunctions and impending danger. One captain was checking his instruments before a flight from Miami to Atlanta. Repo's face appeared floating in the cockpit in front of the astonished pilot. "There will never be another crash of an L-1011, Repo assured the pilot. "We will not let it happen." Eventually, all the parts that had been salvaged from Flight 401 were removed from the various planes that had received them. The spirits of Bob Loft and Don Repo were never seen again after that. Still, they kept their promise to protect the Eastern L-1011 fleet. The crash of Flight 401 on December 29th, 1972, was the last fatal crash of the TriStar fleet. From 72 until Eastern Airlines folded in 91, there were no other crashes involving that fleet. One story I could share with you that I remember from reading the book is the story of an engineer who was doing, I don't know if it was an engineer or just a mechanic, who was down, in the dark doing some work on the plane. And he misplaced his screwdriver, or it was a wrench or something. And he's walking around because he can't see down there. So he's got his hands outstretched like this, looking to see if he can find the screwdriver. Well, then what he feels is another hand touch his hand, and then they put the tool into his hand. And it freaked the guy out, right? Pitch black. But the tool ended up right in his hand. So that's the kind of stuff that that went on, after that flight. And very, very numerous, a lot of witnesses on it. And like it says in here, Eastern, although not acknowledging that this actually happened, they did take the parts off the planes, and then everything stopped. So it's kind of interesting, when you get into the story. Maybe, in a couple of books along the line, maybe around April, we could get back in and do a revisit on the Ghost of Flight 401 book. But it's a fascinating thing to read. It gets into some boring spots, but it's a really good book. Okay, we're going to talk about the next up is the Indian Ocean tsunami. Thailand. In Southeast Asia is a favorite vacation destination for people from all over the world. Thailand is known as the land of smiles for the legendary hospitality and politeness of its people. Buddhism is the major religion of the country, and Buddhist serenity seems ingrained in the people. Tourism companies describing a Thailand vacation promise something for everyone. Sophisticated metropolitan Bangkok has a big city energy, with markets and temples to explore. Northern Thailand is home to archaeological riches, including several World Heritage sites. Visitors can wander through around ancient temples and cities, peek at opulent royal palaces, and visit elephant camps in the majestic mountains to see the great beasts at work and at play. And in the south are Thailand's famous beach resorts. Tourists from across the world come to these luxurious resorts to enjoy the pure white sand, beaches. I knew that was going to happen. I've been getting the itch. Never fails. Always when you've got stuff on your head or you're strapped in for something. Come to these luxury resorts to enjoy the pure white sand, beaches, and the tropical islands dotting the blue-green sea. But on December 26, 2004, this serene paradise became hell on earth. A massive undersea earthquake triggered a series of tsunamis that devastated Southeast Asia. The earthquake that caused the Indian Ocean tsunami was the third largest quake ever, with an estimated magnitude of 9.1 on the Richter scale. It holds the record for the longest duration ever observed. The earthquake redistributed the continental shelf and changed the rotation of the Earth. The quake was so strong, it shortened the length of Earth's day by about 2 microseconds. Think of an ice skater pulling her arms in to tighten the speed at which she spins. All of this caused incredible destruction. Waves 100 feet high slammed into the Indian Ocean, killing 230,000 people in 14 countries. 50,000 people were missing after the tsunami struck. They were later added to the list of presumed dead, bringing the toll to an estimated 280,000. It was the fifth deadliest natural disaster in history. This devastating tragedy led to many hauntings along Thailand's lovely beaches. They began almost immediately after the waves receded. A security guard quit his job after hearing the screams of a woman echoing in the night from the wreckage of a hotel that was particularly badly hit. ABC Australia broadcasting company reported that spook volunteers searching for bodies at the resort areas in Fifi, I think it's Phi Island, and Khao Lak heard tourists singing and laughing on the beach. When they went to investigate, they found only darkness and empty sand. In Khao Lak, a local family's telephone rang constantly in the days and nights following the tsunami. When they answered the phone, they could hear the voices of friends and relatives begging to be rescued from the flames of the crematorium. Many of these ghosts are foreigners. There's the story of a ghostly tourist who wanders up and down one of those beautiful beaches, calling mournfully for her lost child. Another tale tells of a foreign man and his Thai girlfriend who hailed a cab to take them to the airport, but disappeared during the ride. That was not the only report of vanishing passengers. The BBC aired an anecdote told by a tuk-tuk driver who gave his name only as Lek. On January 6, 2005, 7 foreign tourists climbed into his minivan late at night. After agreeing on a 200 baht fee, the tourists asked Lek to drive them to Kata Beach on the west coast of the island of Phuket. I think it's Phuket. I'm not going to make the U short because Phuket, you know what I mean. He drove for a while. Suddenly, he felt his body go curiously numb. He glanced in his rearview mirror, and all 7 of his passengers were gone. Many Thais are deeply superstitious. In addition to Buddhism, there's a certain degree of nature worship going on too. Many Thais believe most large trees are home to ghosts, and every home has a spirit house or altar where offerings of food and drink are made daily to pacify any supernatural entities who may be nearby. Fish sellers and seafood restaurants along the west coast saw a precipitous drop in business from the locals after the tsunami. Many Thais were refusing to eat fish, fearing the ocean creatures had been nibbling on human corpses that had been swept out to sea. Almost 95% of Thailand's population is Buddhist, and they believe in reincarnation, regardless of religion. Each time a person dies, their spirit spends some unspecified amount of time as a ghost, self-aware, seeking rebirth. Buddhist monks chant prayers to the dead, urging them to stop wandering to places where they died, so the living can be left in peace and the dead can be reborn. An interesting facet of these ghost stories is that nearly all the ghosts roaming Thailand's beaches and resorts after the tsunami were foreign, and Asians were utterly terrified of them. In the years after the disaster, tourism from Europe, Australia, and the United States rebounded pretty quickly. But the number of tourists coming to Thailand from Asia plummeted. Psychologist Juan Lapia explained this in an interview with BBC. Foreigners make a big impression on Thais, he said. They're physically imposing and often seem rich and powerful. If people like that die in terrible circumstances, it's not surprising they should come back in people's minds as ghosts, especially when they have so far to go to get home. The Buddhist monks of Thailand have figured out a way to help these lost souls move on to their next life. In addition to burning offerings of paper clothes and symbolic money to propitiate these spirits, the monks added another offering, one that was sure to appeal to foreign tourists trapped in a strange land: pizza. Now, wouldn't that make you feel better? Pizza! Okay, here we go. 'Tis the season, creeping up on Christmas. It's just as easy to find ghosts in December as it is any other month of the year. They're always out there waiting for us to notice them. A flash flood. The middle years of the 19th century were a time of great social advances and great optimism. Social reforms were the order of the day, and many people felt they could change the world for the better through their ideas. It was not only in New England, cradle of the young nation, that these changes were taking place. Even in the Midwest, at that time still considered the wild frontier, social reformers sought to spread their ideas. Judge Wade Loughborough purchased over 1,000 acres of land bordering on the Ohio River in Clermont County, and in 1844 he founded a village he called simply Utopia. Loughborough and his followers were supporters of the philosophy of a Frenchman named Charles Fourier. Fourier envisioned a society based on agriculture, far removed from the events of mechanism, where people would live and work together. Work would be assigned to people according to their natural inclinations and abilities. In short, he envisioned a commune where every person's needs would be provided for and where people would help one another. Loughborough and his group were eager to try out this social experiment for themselves. They built a 2-story brick building with 30 rooms for everyone to live in. Unfortunately, communal living is not always the easiest way to run a society. And within 2 years, it became obvious that the community was not going to be a viable option. In 1846, Loughborough, seeking a way to make at least some of his investment back, sold the land and house to John O. Waters, the leader of the group of 100 spiritualists. The spiritualists, too, were seeking a better way to a perfect society. Spiritualism was intensely popular during the mid-19th century, gaining even more followers during and after the Civil War. Spiritualists believed that human beings don't really die, although physical bodies might decay. The spiritual lives on in the afterlife. Spiritualists sought to communicate with the shades of the deceased with the help of mediums. The souls of the dead, they believed, could speak with those because they left behind through many avenues such as manifestations, written messages, spirit photography, trance, speaking, automatic writing, even music. Waddles, it was Waters on the other page, we'll say Waddles, was a medium, blessed with ability to converse with the spirits. He was not, however, a builder. When the spiritualists bought the house that Loughborough's group had built, they decided, for some reason, not to leave it where it was. Instead, they moved it closer to the river, adding a basement and a 3rd story. The housewarming party for the reconstructed building and the spiritualist grand experiment was planned for December 13th, 1847. The house was filled with people, all gathered to mark the beginning of a new adventure. For most of the partygoers, though, it was not the beginning, but the end. As people mingled and chatted, sipping cups of punch, no one suspected the insidious danger, hang on guys, that stalked the new building, drawing ever closer. Eventually, though, someone noticed that water was was trickling across the floor in a slow but steady stream. Suddenly, the trickle became a torrent. Water from the Ohio River pushed its insufferable way through the house, flooding everything in its path. It's been said that only 6 people survived the calamity. The house is still home to several spirits, according to reports, going back to the early 20th century. The spirits, including a lady in blue, dress and bonnet, always appear soaking wet. Families have lived in the Waddles house since 1917. A second-floor bedroom is believed to have been John Waddles' room, as many people report having a peculiar experience there. People say they feel an unnatural sense of drowsiness there, almost like a trance. In this twilight doze, people say they experience a vision of 6 travelers coming up the dirt road, entering the Waddles house, and walking up the staircase to see the bedroom. As they come closer to the room, the vision fades away. The woman in blue is invariably part of that group in the vision. Witnesses sometimes see her accompanied by a young boy and a man in Amish-style clothing. If this bedroom was once indeed used by John Waddles, these witnesses might be experiencing a hint of the trance state used by that long ago spiritualist when he communicated with phantoms in his own time. Richard Crawford, a historian and writer who has made the study of the Waddles house his passion, described an odd experience he had at the house. He was there with a film crew to shoot an annual Halloween show. The owner's daughter says Crawford, who couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old, just started jumping up and down, saying she wanted to be on television. Understandable behavior for an excitable little kid. The girl's mother shushed her, telling her she had to stay out of the way and leave the film crew alone while they were working. Of course, you can tell a kid 100 times to stay away from something, but making sure she does it is another thing entirely. Filming was delayed several times because of the girl's interruptions. The mother insisted that the crew keep quiet about the ghost stories associated with the house. She didn't want her kid freaked out by the thought of ghosts. Finally, the crew finished, and they were ready to wrap. They were in John Waddles' bedroom when the door burst open and the little girl came barreling into the room yet again. The mother, exasperated, asked the girl what she wanted. Crawford says that the girl asked her mother if she remembered what had happened just a couple of nights earlier. The mother recalled aloud that she'd been baking and had asked the girl to stop bothering her. I'm beginning to see a pattern here. The girl nodded agreement and, according to Crawford's recollection, said, "Yes, and I didn't bug you anymore. I didn't even let the people who came to the door into the house." There were 6 people outside, and there was a lady in a blue dress with a blue bonnet, and they were both all wet. Mother and film crew sat stunned. The girl's mother had been vigilant about shielding her young daughter, from the stories that surround the house. But all on her own, the girl had just described the apparitions people have been seeing for years, down to the smallest detail. They say children are more receptive to seeing spirits simply because they haven't yet learned that they can't. It seems the little girl was picking up on the psychic echo of that long ago tragedy. All right, the haunting of Hunley House. The morning of December 12th, 1928, dawned bright and brisk in Carbondale, Illinois. Before midnight that evening, the town would be rocked with news of a horrific double murder. One of the victims was John Charles Hunley, who had been mayor of Carbondale from 1908 to 07 to 08. He was a wealthy, well-respected businessman who had many friends and business associates in the area. Also dead was Hunley's second wife, Luella. Although he had the respect of his peers, Hunley had made some mistakes in his life. In 1893, he had killed a man Hunley had unalived a music teacher, but was acquitted by the jury after he explained his reason. The man had been sleeping with his wife. By invoking the unwritten law, Hunley gained the sympathy of the husbands and brothers sitting in the jury box. After this incident, Hunley divorced his unfaithful wife. This caused a family rift between Hunley and his son Victor. The spat has supposedly been smoothed over for years before John's murder, but there were those in town who hadn't forgotten the bitter feelings between father and son. Hunley remarried a few years after his divorce, choosing Luella as his new bride. Luella herself came from a business-minded family. Her father was Ruffin Harrison, one of the founders of the town of Herrin, Illinois, and the owner of mysterious coal mines in the region. And she was sister to George Harrison, president of Herrin's First National Bank. In 1915, John and Luella Hunley bought a lot at the corner of Main and Maple Streets and built a lavish, luxurious home for themselves. John was the model of a Gilded Age tycoon, partnering with his son Victor in the younger Hunley's coal business. Luella, as befitting wife of an upper-class businessman, was very active in charity work and was an accomplished musician besides. Luella, in particular, was regarded as having no enemies, which made her murder even more shocking. A family friend, Job Goodall, Joe Goodall, sorry about that, visited the Hunleys on the evening of Wednesday, December 12th. The Hunleys were planning a motor trip to their winter home in Florida, and they were looking forward with high spirits to their departure on Sunday. Goodall left the house around 8 p.m., and Luella locked the back door behind him. Just before midnight, Olga Casper, the Hunleys' next-door neighbor, heard several pistol shots ring out into the night. Peering out her window, she saw the lights in the Hunley house go out. Later, she heard someone running past her house, coming from the Hunleys' home and heading towards Victor's house, just 200 yards away. In response to phone calls from the neighbors, police were on scene in minutes. The investigation determined that John Hunley was murdered. He was the first one murdered. His body was found in an upstairs bedroom, dressed only in a nice shirt and socks. He had been shot from behind 6 times with a .45 caliber revolver. Luella Hunley had been killed, it seemed, on a rear stairway, attacked, as she went to investigate the earlier shots. She'd been shot twice in the head and once in the heart. From the stairs, her body had rolled in the kitchen. A pencil lay on the floor next to her left hand, and an unfinished letter was still sitting on the table in the next room. Luella's was a life suddenly interrupted. At first, Chief of Police Joe Montgomery told the press that robbery seemed to be the motive for the murders. However, there was only the slimmest evidence for this theory: an empty pocketbook on the floor near Luella's body. Other than that, nothing in the house was disturbed. Not the valuable artwork, gotta stretch my leg here, not the expensive furnishings, and not the considerable amount of cash. The police quickly focused their investigation elsewhere. On the morning of December 13th, investigators thoroughly searched the Hunley house. They discovered that the back door that Job Goodall said Luella had locked behind him after his visit was unlocked at the time of the murders. With no sign of forced entry, that hinted strongly that the Hunleys knew their attacker. Perhaps Luella even got up from her letter writing to let him in the house. Tracking dogs were brought in and put on the trail of the killer. 4 times, the dogs led their handler straight to the home of Victor Hunley, John's son. This didn't look good for Victor. Even worse, investigators from the Jackson County Sheriff's Office searched the route between the two houses. Along the path, the investigators found several slips of paper that seemed to have been dropped unnoticed, perhaps as the killer fled the Hunley house. One paper, dated December 5th, was a notice of termination of partnership of Mr. and Mrs. J.C. Hunley with Victor Hunley, dissolving their support of Victor's prominent coal business. Another paper was a blank deposit slip. On the back, a note in Luella's handwriting figured the interest on a loan in the amount of $532. At the top of the slip, also in Luella's handwriting, was the name Vic. All this was enough for Sheriff William Flanagan to bring Victor Hunley in for questioning. Things began to look even bleaker for Victor when investigators found a blood-stained khaki shirt during their search of his house. Victor claimed he'd been wearing the shirt when he'd been told of his father's and stepmother's murders. Police had come to his door, Victor said, and had woken him and asked him to come to the elder Hunley's house. He had picked up his stepmother's body while he was wearing the shirt, and that's where the blood had come from. Investigators countered with the fact that Victor hadn't touched the body. Victor immediately changed his story. He remembered suddenly that he'd been wearing the shirt while out hunting quail, and that's where the blood had come from. Sheriff Flanagan hammered on for 7 hours. Victor told investigators that on Wednesday night, the night of the murders, he'd been home all evening, reading and playing with his son. He'd gone to bed early. Then he'd been awakened by the police. He admitted that he owned a .45 caliber revolver, but he claimed he had recently loaned it to his father. Police searched both houses for the gun, but found nothing. To this day, the murder weapon has never been found. All of Victor's protestations did not prove his innocence. He was put under house arrest as the investigation continued. At the inquest, Job Goodall testified that John Hunley had recently told him that he planned to write up a new will. John planned to disinherit Victor because he was no good. If this was the case, Victor stood to lose a lot of money by being cut out of his father's will. John Hunley's estate was worth over $350,000, but Victor was faced with having to settle for just his trust fund, worth less than $15,000. Victor was arrested for the murders of John Charles and Luella Hunley on December 15th, immediately after their funerals. The state's attorney, Fletcher Lewis, felt sure he could prove Victor guilty in court. Incredibly, though, Lewis was wrong. In an amazing display of the accused being innocent until proven guilty, Lewis was forced to let Victor go free on December 31st. After the hearing, the disappointed prosecutor made a statement to the press. All the facts and circumstances learned from the investigation amply justified the holding of Victor Hunley and the filing of a complaint charging him with murder. I've decided to prosecute this case no further. As if washing down the bitter pill, Lewis added, I feel quite sure that the atrociousness of this crime will compel the conscience of the person who committed it to someday make public his guilt. But if Lewis thought to shame Victor or anyone else into confessing, it didn't work. The shooting of J.C. and Luella Hunley has never been solved. Maybe that's why the house in which they died still echoes with their presence. The mansion sat empty for 2 years after the murders. The only physical evidence of the tragedy was a bullet hole in the wall near where Luella's body was found. But the community's memory was long, especially when it came to murder. In 1930, Edwin Volger Sr. bought the mansion and its contents from the Hunley estate. In 1972, the house was sold to the Simmons family, who converted the mansion into a gift shop with apartments upstairs. Several of the past owners and tenants have reported oddities in the building. One resident heard the piano downstairs playing faintly by itself. Her family also heard footsteps going up and down the stairs. Former owner Victoria Spreehy felt that Luella's ghost followed her home from work at least once. Spreehy ran the gift shop in the Hunley house for 5 years. One evening, as she let herself into the empty house, she noticed that the kitchen lights were on, and she heard pots and pans clanging. She wasn't spooked, by the industrious spirit, though. It's a very peaceful vibe. Spreehy's daughter Nina had her own odd experience in the house. She and her husband have both seen the porch swing move by itself, even when there's no wind. I think Mr. and Mrs. Hunley still like to swing at night, she said. All right, that's it. Till next week. So, see, we're getting more and more into ghost stories with this. It's harder to read on this tablet because it's smaller, and I have to enlarge the text. So if it sounds like I'm doing run-on sentences, I am, because it's harder to see. There's no there's not a lot of separation of paragraphs. So that's why it sounds like it's wrong. Anyway, that concludes until next week at noon. We're going to continue at 3 p.m. We'll see you guys on all three networks at 3 p.m. Pacific to build that gingerbread house. And I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. And then we're going to get into the National Lampoon gingerbread house as well. So we're going to start building that and Cousin Eddie's trailer and all that stuff. And like I said, we still, we're going to be going through Christmas for a while. We've got a bunch of projects, a handful of projects that are in line. I mean, behind the gingerbread houses, I have a couple Lego sets to build. One's a holiday one, one's not. We have that. I also have a couple craft things I bought at Dollar Tree, and we have that Millennium Falcon model coming up as well too. So there's a lot going on. So I get development classes, you name it. We're going to start hitting it hard. Okay. Anyway, I want to thank you all. I really appreciate each and every one of you coming in today. I will see you all at 3 p.m. Pacific for some more fun. Okay. Good night, TikTok. I'll see you later. 3 p.m. Maybe. Maybe not. Ah, there you are. 27 peeking in. So we had 27 people actually watching. Okay. All right. All right, everybody. We had 270 people watching over there. And welcome, everybody. And I will see you later on, 3 p.m. Pacific today. I hope. Come join me. Help me finish off that gingerbread house. It shouldn't take too long. And then we'll get the walls framing up on the other one, because that's probably what we'll end up finishing off with, is getting the walls up, because that's a bigger house. It's a 2-story gingerbread house. So it should be interesting to build, or rather cookie house. All right. So I will see you guys today at 3:30 p.m. At 3 p.m. Pacific. And don't forget tomorrow night, which I forgot to say on there, which I'll do later. 6:30 p.m. Pacific tomorrow night for live tarot card readings, free tarot card readings over at TikTok, past, present, future. So come on over and join us over there. All right, guys, I will see you, and have a great rest. Have a great rest of your day if you don't come to the gingerbread build. Otherwise, come on down. We're going to have some fun, talk story, and do all kinds of stuff. Have a good one.